Greetings everybody, my name is Tommy the Game Master and welcome to my channel. Recently Capcom released the Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection. It pretty much comes with every Street Fighter game released in the 90s, from the original Street Fighters up to the Street Fighter 3 The Third Strike. Now personally I'm not the best at these games, but I do enjoy them, and I do have some memories of me getting my butt kicked by a few friends of mine while sitting around playing Street Fighter 2. Also, with 4 of these games having online added in, is this a Street Fighter collection worth getting? Now, before we begin looking at these games, I should say there are 12 games in this collection. However, if you disregard that about half of them are just Street Fighter 2 variations, also 3 of them are variations of Street Fighter 3, and then the alpha ones, although each one is considered a new game in their own right, they do play very similar, and you really only get 4 different fighting games. And one of these games absolutely does suck. I mean, it is way worse than E.T. in my book, but let's look at each game and each version of said game and give you my opinions on them as someone who is just a casual at this type of game. Let's talk about the original Street Fighter, and oh my god, does this game suck. It's one of the worst games I've ever played. And before people get angry, I'm not talking about this game. That's the original Street Fighter 2. See how it has that 2 at the end of it on the title screen? No, the original Street Fighter is this game. If there is anything good I can say about this one, for 1987 the graphics are pretty decent. Characters are large and detailed, and we have some really nice backgrounds. But that's all I have to say as far as things that are good about this game. The controls are clunky. You only get to play as Ryu, and due to said clunky controls, it's impossible to pull off any of his special moves that are still here, but just don't expect to actually ever do them, at least on purpose. The hit detection is garbage, and in the end, it's just not a fun experience to try to get through this game. Oh, we can also throw in some hilariously dated audio samples to just show how much an aged turd this game really is. And before anyone says you're comparing it to later games, to where they of course made some improvements, I say this: Capcom knows this one is garbage. How do I know this? Because the last time Capcom released a Street Fighter Anniversary Collection, this game wasn't on it. That's right, the PS2 game released to celebrate the original's release did not include the original game. Like I said, because it's a big stinking pile of doo-doo. So Capcom recognizes this, and they don't usually bundle it in with a lot of Street Fighter products. So this is the first time, in fact, I think I've seen it bundled in with Street Fighter games. So this game's a bit of a rarity, but there's a good reason. You're going to play this game once just to check it out, and then you're going to forget it even exists. The original Street Fighter may be a piece of crap, but the sequel sure wasn't. I remember my sister having a birthday party when we were both kids, and since me and my friends were kind of babysitting her and her friends, my mom got us a Super Nintendo to kind of play together, and Street Fighter 2 was one of the games somebody picked out, and we played it all night long. Street Fighter 2, the original, does suffer from H-spots, and yes, compared to the other versions out there, this one is still the least worth your time. But it's a fun game, and one that where if you have some nostalgia towards it, you will still find it enjoyable. The roster now has 8 characters. The controls are improved, so you can do those special moves whenever you want to, and they just don't come out of nowhere. The characters all feel different, and the limited amount of voice samples you get are now just calling out the names of the moves, even though some of them are still unintentionally hilarious. My only real complaint about this game is how much it suffers from slow down, and just how much slower it runs compared to the other versions of this game. It's a fun game, worth checking out if you've never played it before, but once you've checked this one out, you're going to be moving along too, simply because the other versions of this out there are better. Back in the day before they had patches and DLC, The way Capcom would fix problems was to just release another version of Street Fighter II. Street Fighter II World Champion Edition was released with some small improvements to graphics and some fine-tuning of the characters, and throw in the 4 boss characters from the original one are now playable here too. Also fixed are some of the slowdown issues I had with the original. It's a small update, so nothing to get too excited over though. Again, like the original one, this one is worth your time checking out, but just not as much time as the rest, especially when you consider how good the next one is. Yeah, you know those slowdown issues I've been talking about with the last 2 games? Not happening here. Hyper Fighting is a sped up, smoothed over version of Street Fighter II. The graphics are fast and the animation is smooth, different color designs for the characters. Also, they changed Chun-Li and Ken around a bit, so Chun-Li now has a fireball move, and Ken's moves and animations differ quite a bit more than Ryu's, making him a separate character. A lot of people considered this the best version of Street Fighter II, and I don't blame them. But personally, I like the next entry on the list a little bit better. Super Street Fighter II is more of a remaster or a remake than just another version. It's still Street Fighter II at the core, but the graphics have gotten a bit of an overhaul. Even more differences in the characters can be seen and felt here, with Ryu now having a red fireball and Ken's fire punch. Throw in 4 complete new characters with the likes of Cammy, DJ, Fei Long, and T-Hawk, and there's just enough new here for me to say give this a go. That said, it does run slower than Hyper Fighting. The next game changes that, but it presents itself with even more problems, at least in the single player mode. Now, I don't want anyone to think that I don't love Super Turbo, but give me the PS2 version or the HD version of this one over the original arcade version. What's wrong with the original arcade? Well, if you want to get through the single player mode and you're not an advanced expert player, then good luck with just how cheap and just plain broken the AI is. Even set on easy, it's impossible to get through. Which is a shame though. I enjoy the changes in Super Turbo. Chun-Li has a few new moves which would become her regular Alpha series movesets, and they changed the way her spinning bird kick works, making it a horizontal charge rather than a vertical charge, opening up different possibilities in this game. Throw in a super bar into the mix to do some hyper combos at the bottom, and Super Turbo is just plain fun. Just stick to the multiplayer on this one, folks. Oh, and for those snobs out there who are just going to say, well, get good, this is what I have to say to you. Number 1, not everyone who plays Street Fighter II wants to become a world champion-esque player. Some of us just play it to have fun, sit back, and relax. And number 2, it's kind of hard to get good when the AI is going to kick your ass right into the ground on the very first fight. The cheap AI makes this game broken when it comes to the single player, which is unfortunate. Multiplayer wise, one of the best games in the collection. Single player, garbage. The Alpha series was a bit of a change for the Street Fighter series. The games come between the original and Street Fighter II when it comes to the story, and it took the super combos and the chargeable meters from Super Turbo and made them a staple of the series, adding a bit more of an anime aesthetic, and these games are my personal favorite in the series. The original one is the weakest though, smallest lineup of characters. Graphics are only a small step up from Super 2, but not by much, and it just seems weak compared to the other two when it comes to the action. Street Fighter Alpha 2 is more of a soft reboot of the series, and it's where we're introduced to a lot of people's favorite characters when it comes to the Alpha series. Akuma was shown in Super Turbo and Alpha as a hidden boss, but he's now fully playable here without any cheat codes for the first time. Ryu's favorite stalker, Sakura, makes her first appearance here and quickly became a fan favorite. Of course, the two can't stand up to the mightiest fighter of them all, Dan Hibiki. Okay, he kinda sucks, but overall I enjoy this game. The wider selection of characters really helps, and the game just runs quite a bit smoother. That said, the next game is, in my opinion, the best in the entire 30th anniversary collection. Street Fighter Alpha 3. This game uses the anime characters design of the Street Fighter Alpha series to its fullest potential. To me, this is the most colorful game in the series, and not to mention the most fun. 3 ways to fight: the normal way, an easy Xism way, or to create your own combos with Vism. The only downside in this game is if you lose to M. Bison during the final fight in a single player, you will get this ending where he blows up a city somehow using the life force of your character. Behold the power of horny street fighting teen girls! Wow, I guess it really does pack a punch. Fortunately, the collection does offer a quick save feature, and I recommend using it here if you're playing through the single player. Will save you some frustration of having to start over if you lose the final boss fight. On to Street Fighter 3, which is the last series in the pack, and I think probably has some of the most underrated games. But I think it's because Capcom screwed the pooch when it came to this game's story and lineup. Street Fighter Alpha had a lot of new characters, but it had plenty of the old and a story setup that gamers were familiar with. Street Fighter 3 feels like an entirely new fighting franchise with Ryu and Ken cameoing in, just because of all the different characters and just how different things are, both from a story standpoint and the way these character designs are. While Akuma and Chun-Li would later make an appearance, the original Street Fighter 3 didn't have them. Another strike against this game comes with the last guy, Gil. Oh my god, do I hate freaking Gil. He is probably one of my least favorite end bosses of any fighting games. Sure, you do get multiple chances on him, unlike Alpha 3's Bison's, where he only had one chance, but here he's way overpowered. His fireballs are hard to counter, and if that wasn't enough to drive you crazy, he can resurrect himself back to full health if you defeat him while his super bar is full. God, I just hate this quarter-munching cheap-ass jerk. But at least he has one of the funniest mistranslations in the history of gaming. That's some dignity. It even beats the amount of dignity Dudley has. But I don't think that would scar my DNA. Now, if it was divinity to show that because he thinks that just because he's OP, he thinks he's God now, that would actually fit his personality. They also have a new countermeasure that I never really got a hang of. Still, let's look at all 3 versions of this game, and starting with the original, I can tell you that some of the things in the original version of 3 did things that no other Street Fighter game did before and after, and that is having changeable backgrounds. Bridges can collapse, or as your fight carries on in rounds, days can become nights. It's actually a cool feature. The graphics in the 3rd version, regardless of what version you're playing, are still the most impressive and fluid of the animation and impressive details, and is probably the best Street Fighter game on the collection. I prefer the anime visuals of Alpha slightly more, but I would be lying to say that Street Fighter 3 doesn't have better graphics. The 2nd version of Street Fighter, much like Alpha 2, is just really the original one done better. A few more characters to pick from, including Akuma, and this game is in native widescreen. The only downside is only one background per fight. Now, much like Alpha 3, the 3rd strike is a completely new build with a lot more characters added, a new feature that lets you pick your next fight, and completely new endings to boot. Up until now, when Capcom has decided to release Street Fighter 3, it's always been this version, and I can see why. It is the best version of them out there. Unless you're a fan of Sean, because he went from being an eccentric but strong version of Ryu to now being worse than Dan. That said, I do have an affinity towards Street Fighter the 2nd wave more than the 3rd one, but I can understand why a lot of people appreciate the 3rd strike. The online in this game is okay, I guess, for the games that support it. When I first got it, the slowdown that I saw really screwed it up, but now that a few weeks have passed and less people are now playing, the gameplay actually runs somewhat smoother, which isn't exactly a good thing to say to Capcom here. Game works better now because less people are playing it. Anyways, only 4 games are playable, and to be fair, they are probably the best ones to play online, which are Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, Super Turbo, Alpha 3, and the Third Strike. So you can take the best of each game online to play with a friend or other combatants. The online was slow, like I said, for the first few weeks, but it's improved now since less people are playing it. When it comes to the extra, the game collection comes with a few good extras. We get bios of each of the characters, the history of the Street Fighter games, and some notes on how the games were made. Also, each game has a small bio on the game select screen, so you can read and understand the history of that version, plus any changes that were made from the last version of the game. Overall, it's not a bad package. I have seen better on other collections, but I've also seen a whole lot worse. Street Fighter, the 30th Anniversary Collection comes with a lot of Street Fighter goodness. Even if there's technically only 4 games, you get pretty much all the versions of them. So is it worth the money for the value that you get? The answer to that is yes, but with some quotation marks. As far as what you get in the bundle, it's okay, but it's not great. Now, having arcade perfect versions of Street Fighter 2 sure beats the hell out of the Super Nintendo ports that we got. However, there are plenty of times where there were better console ports than the arcade version, either due to the fact that they had extra characters or extra features here. And I'm looking specifically more at Alpha 3 and Super Turbo, as well as probably the Third Strike when it comes to widescreen support. So you have some of the better versions of these games out there in some cases, and it's just a shame that Capcom decided to stuff the original arcade games in there when they're just better versions out there. It's because of this that I'll probably keep my Street Fighter Alpha anthologies for my PlayStation 2, just simply because it does have a better version of Alpha 3 as well as Super Gems fighters. Still worth picking up if you're a Street Fighter fan.